And welcome back, everyone, to yet another edition of Going for Two, presented by Home Field Apparel. This is the official podcast, of course, of the Extra Points newsletter. I am the publisher of said newsletter and your host for today, Matt Brown. I am posted up here from the Brown family compound in cold, rainy, morose Chicago. And I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Bryan Fischer, who is a real jerk, posting up here from spring meetings in decidedly not Chicago. Bryan, I'm excited for you. I'm happy to see you, but also go to hell.
Well, you would say that, but it's 90 degrees here and I am burning up. But we will try to make it through this podcast, and hopefully my laptop here will not overheat. But it's good to see you, and good to be out here at spring meetings. It's fun to see a lot of names and faces, and especially given the last 2 years, I haven't seen a lot of folks, but in person at least. But it's great to see them, great to catch up, and great to learn what's going on in the industry, because I think everybody's both getting gray hairs and pulling them out at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's true. We got a chance to see some people at the NCAA convention. We got a chance to see some people at the SBJ thing in Vegas a little bit earlier. This is different. Why don't you tell us what's going on? Because this is not an event that I think is part of the common off-season calendar for a lot of sports fans. What's going on in Phoenix right now?
Yeah, essentially, like if you're pretty much a lot of the conferences, will have kind of their spring meetings. They will have fall meetings, spring meetings. Sometimes they'll be in conjunction with basketball tournaments, with football games, whatnot. And obviously, this has been a kind of a regular on the college athletics calendar for a long time. At this kind of early May type of year, people would come down here, meet with bowl partners, meet with TV partners, really get together with a lot of their athletics cohorts, not just athletic directors, but you're talking about faculty athletic reps and, kind of others connected to the athletic department to kind of get on the same page, really is the biggest thing, especially now, given kind of the Zoom fatigue. A lot of folks, want to see each other in person, discuss a lot of the hot button issues that are certainly at play here in the NCAA. And it's great to catch up with a lot of them as they kind of get into meetings mode and hopefully kind of chart the course for not only their conferences, but the NCAA as well. So there's, I would say roughly about 300 or so administrators and bowl reps and media members and all that kind of in and around Phoenix, meeting, inside, outside, and whatnot. And it's going to be very interesting, I guess, to see what kind of the tone of things is coming out of these meetings.
If you're a bowl rep going to one of these things, do you still have to wear the ridiculous colored blazer when it's 90 degrees? Do they give you like the pastel polo shirt instead? Like what's the dress code for off-season bowl rep?
Well, I have not seen necessarily any of the jackets that you refer to, but a lot of polos, a lot of branded polos, coaches, ads, the like. That is kind of the MO is wearing some branded polos. That's for sure. But
it makes it easier to figure out who everybody is by checking the logo, right?
Oh, it's a tremendous help, especially as we're used to kind of like, is that so and so? Man, they look like they lost a lot of weight, or hey, they're looking a little thin. All right. But yeah, no, it's fun to see everybody, and it is rare that you can get enough people kind of in place and happy to be there. But for a lot of folks, especially from the Midwest where you're from, we just ran into John Steinbrecher, the MAC commissioner, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely enjoying the temperatures here than compared to back home."
Yeah, I bet. On the off chance that anyone listening to this is one of the companies that makes the bowl blazers or is somehow involved in that supply chain, my email is matt@extrapointsmb.com. Not only do I want to talk to you, I'm willing to pay an irresponsible amount of money to get Going for Two blazers made. I would wear one of those over my home field shirt every single time. I'll do the ad read in a second, Connor. But before we get into that,
well, it's funny because the Fiesta Bowl is kind of plays quasi host. This was originally back in the day. I'm sure fans of scandals in college athletics, remember the Fiesta Frolic. This is kind of the much nicer and rebooted version of that. And there's still some golf outings, from coaches. I ran into a few that were carrying their clubs out to the course earlier this morning. But I think for the most part, you mentioned the Fiesta Bowl. I might be able to hook us up. We'll see. I'll make some calls. I'll make send some text, and hopefully run into some folks. We will get on to that for sure.
We will. I want to throw in a note to the Fiesta Frolic in the show notes if you are unfamiliar with those scandals. So I'm guessing they're not just letting you and our reporter colleagues in on the boardroom where they're talking with everything here. I've seen some of the other stories that have come out from these meetings. I guess we can start here with this. Have you heard anything else new about the Big Ten's media rights and new television deals? Seems like there was some reporting from CBS, some other places today. The conference is hoping to have this wrapped up by Memorial Day, which is something you and I had talked about before. Seen a couple other numbers thrown out. Have you heard anything new?
I think they're still in a process, and obviously this is a good time for the ads in the Big Ten to kind of get updated on a lot of those negotiations. There's certainly a few minor sticking points and things that they want clarity on, and so I think this is kind of the purpose of these meetings. But yeah, I think for the most part, we understand that Fox is obviously, as we talked about before, and as we've reported, part of the deal going forward, and really it's just kind of who is that next partner, and it could be partners. I don't think that's completely set in stone in terms of how many other parts of this package they're selling off. I know, Kevin Warren has discussed, Amazon and Apple are at the table. They've made their pitches and they're part of the negotiations as well. So I don't think anything is completely set at this point, but I think they are anticipating things getting wrapped up in the next couple of weeks. And look, I know there's, you mentioned some of the reports about $1 billion thrown around. I think everybody understands those are kind of the expectations that this is going to be the biggest media rights deal in college athletics history. And I think the Big Ten understands that not only when they put that number out there, they understand that this is a big time deal for their athletic departments in terms of funding things like full cost of attendance scholarships for baseball and some of the other kind of changing NCAA rules that are out there that could make that money quite useful.
Unquestionably, I think. I mean, honestly, if the Navigate projections were more accurate, $1 billion might be on the low end. Like $1 billion, I think, is like around 70-ish something a year. I guess maybe if you average the high 50s at the beginning of the deal and the 90s at the end of the deal, maybe you're getting into the 70s. But yeah, like a billion, billion one, $1 billion two. That seems like legitimately on the table.
Well, I think, and one of the points up for discussion is just kind of the length of things. How long is this deal really going to be? Are they going to stagger parts of the deal, between Fox and maybe some of their other partners to where, Fox could have a longer kind of deal with the conference as well. And then you have multiple shorter ones. So you can go back to the well, so to speak, to where, maybe in Netflix, they're not at the table now, but perhaps, in 4 or 5 years, they are back in the negotiations with a league like the Big Ten. And you also got to keep in mind, look, CFP meetings were last week. A lot of the commissioners have been mulling around here as well, and they were obviously involved in those. But the CFP discussion and expansion and meeting component of that is still to be determined. And I think that's kind of out there, as well as is that going to soak up some of the material and money in the marketplace, and how do the conferences kind of trail off from that? So I think maybe down the road, the Big Ten could look at, say, hey, maybe we'll do a short-term deal so we know kind of what that CFP structure is. We can kind of move forward from there with our second media partner and maybe get a second bite at the apple, come playoff expansion time. But I think those are, a lot of discussions that have been had, and obviously a lot of people are not saying too much in terms of what the ultimate numbers are and what the ultimate length of these deals are.
Sure. I mean, honestly, really, other than the American Athletics deal a couple of years ago, the industry standard for a lot of these contracts really has been much shorter. The WAC and the Big Sky, I want to say, are 4 or 5 year deals. Like the Big Ten's last deal was only a 5-year deal, and given how volatile consumer behavior is, and quite frankly how quickly streaming's changing, I'd be kind of surprised if this was more than like a 6-year deal, just because who knows what Apple is going to be in 6 years? Who knows which of these streaming services are still going to be in existence. I mean, Netflix is maybe not as much of a giant now as they looked 2 years ago. I mean, I've seen some industry analysts say we probably even really shouldn't say FANG anymore, because the N in the FANG for Netflix isn't really a peer to Facebook, Amazon, or Google anymore, or Apple. So who knows? A 12-year deal to get a very big number in the headline, that sounds like that would be surprising to me. Maybe you've heard differently.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the AAC. I think it was a big thing for them, back in the day, that they kind of went a few extra years probably than they should have, because they wanted to kind of hit that 1 billion mark, right?
So yeah, that was very important to get that in the headline.
And there's a lot of discussion, I think, in terms of LinkedIn. And look, you mentioned kind of the unknown future, right? of that fame, Facebook has poured a lot of resources into the quote unquote metaverse, right? Maybe you want to do a separate deal down the road for streaming these games in virtual reality or some
God,
crazy things like that. So you never know, and so I think there's a lot of options on the table, and I think flexibility has been key for a lot of TV partners, media companies, the leagues themselves. Look, you're doing data deals, you're doing like 9 different things, tangentially related to the actual games themselves. So, there's a lot of negotiations going on, and I don't know if anybody knows the future of college athletics in the next 6 months to a year, much less what it's going to be like from the media landscape perspective 5 or 6 years from now.
man, the idea, as soon as you said broadcasting college football games of virtual reality and like the metaverse, like something visceral in my body just kind of twitched. Like, what if we can get Iowa football and JPEG monkeys together on the blockchain? Like, man, just kill me now. Just put me on another beat, because I don't want to be a part of that, which is of course where this may be going. So you have had a chance to talk to, I think, a couple of commissioners. You've been talking with other reporters. You've been out there. What are some of the other things that you've been hearing out in Phoenix that maybe I haven't seen because I've been on the phone and looking at Twitter like a stupid person today?
Well, it is a lot of the stuff that you're ended up reading or following along on Twitter. And look, I think the uncertainty aspect of things and the rate of change, I think that has been a big discussion, not only at these meetings, but I think in general across the industry. It's just, administrators trying to catch their feet at the latest change and understanding, hey, there's another one right around the corner. And I think dealing with that, processing that, getting a plan in place. I mean, you talk about ADs in terms of how their approach has shifted on things like NIL. It could be a change from week to week. Much less from 6 months to a year. And you got to keep in mind, these are enterprises that are used to doing things far, far in advance, where you're planning out every little detail that you possibly can think of, to down the road. And so I think that has been, a unique challenge. It's something that does keep folks up at night. And, on top of that, you're dealing with so many different aspects of just the day-to-day running of your business, coaching, contract extensions, and crazy things that are happening, at your local campus level too. So it's a lot of change, and a lot of folks that are truthfully looking forward to some vacations down the road. That's for sure.
Yeah, this is something that we and I have talked about several times over the past couple of months, and in some of the text conversations I've been having over the last 72 hours, the idea of a brain drain or additional exodus of coaching and administrative and just business talent, perhaps coming this summer, is a concern that's been raised to me more and more, especially if like you already weren't getting paid what you should have been. Your hours are already stupid. And NIL, what you had to deal with last summer was a challenge. And now with how it seems to have really kind of grown this year into maybe the most ridiculous labor market in all of sports, like domestic or international, I get why somebody would say, you know what, maybe I'll just sell cell phones, or maybe I'll do something completely different. Maybe
I
it's a
don't know
good thing
quite
and it's
about
a bad
that,
thing.
but I did see Bob Bowlesby. He looks quite relaxed, knowing that the future out there is a few more vacations like the one he just had. So.
No, sure. So I know that one of the this I think broke. You may not even seen it yet. Just a little bit before we started chatting, the Ross Dellinger at Sports Illustrated was just reporting that from talking to people out here that there's a belief that the NCAA is going to issue new guidance about collectives and what's appropriate for transfers and what engagement level is appropriate for recruits, and maybe trying to put a little bit of this toothpaste back in the tube. Is that something that you've been hearing from out there, or an appetite for actually trying to enforce some rules?
Yeah, I think a lot of the ADs were kind of getting updated in terms of what some of these rules ultimately were going to be, and obviously there's a draft memo, if you will, I guess, kind of circulating out there as well, that a lot of folks have either had input on or kind of discussed in person at a lot of these meetings. And look, I think it's something that everybody kind of wants. They want these kind of guardrails, but I also got a lot of skepticism in terms of like how are we supposed to monitor this? Already the NCAA wants us to monitor things like phone calls and when we're contacting recruits, and like now we're adding another step in terms of NIL compliance. That's just I think from the micro level in terms of dealing with things on a day-to-day, there is some concern over really how are we going to be responsible for these boosters right now, that we're supposed to kind of keep at arm's length, either because of our state laws or because of kind of the NCAA guidelines that are put out on there on NIL. And now you're saying we actually got to monitor that and monitor what they're doing. It's a sticky world, and I think navigating kind of those gray areas where you do want to make sure that those student athletes have the opportunities, and you do have making sure that they are getting kind of the most money and most bang for their buck when they have some of these marketing opportunities, or they're doing these social media promotions. Everybody understands that's great for the athletes, but at the same time, it's a big challenge for a lot of these schools.
I understand skepticism about being able to enforce anything generally, just because I don't think either of us have ever had a chance to see what any kind of efficient enforcement mechanism for literally anything looks like. Like, we still haven't had total resolution for the FBI stuff, which, I mean, one, when you actually did have somebody with subpoena power to collect evidence, like that should have gone by sooner. And then two, it also seems a little bit silly to get extremely angry about a lot of this, given that now much of that exact activity is legal or something very similar to it, or at least, if not legal, definitely happening everywhere else. But on the other hand, I don't think there's a single person outside of maybe the most ideologically motivated commentator who looks at what we have right now and thinks this is everything that's happening now is good. I'm enthusiastically signing off on this. Like, I suspect I speak for several fans, and I, based on the feedback I got in my post here today, a lot of reporters and administrators, and that I want people to be paid. I am pro NIL. Matt Brown, really believed the previous status quo was exploitive to athletes. And what has happened over the last couple of months, I think, is also exploitive and has real potential dangerous implications for a lot of systems long term. Throwing $800,000 on somebody who is not even a third team all conference player, but only if they hit the portal, and not really not having any kind of contract security. I don't see how that's good for anybody. Places that have really liberalized labor markets still have some constraints, some barriers, some structure that is completely absent in this world right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks are understanding that we might move quickly to a place where there is that kind of collective bargaining, where students are treated as employees. Like, that had been a previous third rail, but I do get the sense that is those kind of discussions are being had, and people are a little bit more receptive to that than they were 4 or 5 years ago. And it used to be really a line in the sand. We were not going to go near there. Now, I think there is a little bit of looking towards saying, hey, maybe that is the kind of solution to our problems. Is something along those lines.
It's funny. I don't think that the change has been. It's not just dramatic over the last 4 or 5 years. I think it's been dramatic, not just over the last 4 or 5 months, but honest to God, over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Particularly, I think, among other reporters, people that may have been much more squeamish about the idea of formalizing athletes as employees, or like really shoveling dirt on the last vestiges of the previous system, to now realizing, well, this is the only mechanism to stabilize any of this, to enforce a 1-year contract, or to have financial predictability, or any of these other structures, right? Like in soccer, which is, I know, the sport that you follow much more closely, the idea of contract length, as I understand it, can be pretty fungible, or not. That's not the right word, but flexible, right? But if I am a second division team in Manaus, and Corinthians in Brazil decides to buy, grab my player, I have to give them there's a transfer fee, and Manaus may benefit by getting money by selling these players off to the bigger schools. Maybe that's a world kind of where things end up happening in college athletics. Maybe that's like how the Lafayettes and the St. Peters and the Montana States end up financing some of their program, is forcing collectives to cut them a check. I don't know. That would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. I think it's definitely thinkable now.
We'll see. I think the thing is that I do get the sense that maybe some more outside the box thinking is coming to college athletics, which is certainly a welcome departure from a lot of the insular type of thinkings that kind of led us to a lot of these moments. I mean, look, there was certainly a lot of discussions around Mark Emmert's departure and what that kind of means. And there's some hope that it'll bring in some new fresh ideas. And there's definitely some concern from, I think, smaller schools more so than say the Power Five, that are kind of pretty set in terms of where they're going and how they can make rules and stuff. But if you're a smaller school, maybe that is something you put forward and put on the table, because what do you got to lose at this point? And I think for the most part, the biggest frustration really, and it's even more so for the coaches dealing with this, right? It's not just that NIL is present in recruiting. It's like a lot of the rumors and stuff that have come out that they have to kind of combat. It's like my an AD might say, my president, is getting a call from so and so about hearing about this $3 million like. That dealing with some of the unknown, because there's no transparency, I think is another kind of sense of frustration too. You just you really don't know what the landscape is. You don't know what the market is, because there's not really the transparency that there used to be. And so, we'll see where it ends up going. But it's definitely led to a few gray hairs. I can say that much.
That is a good point. And it's something that, I was thinking about this earlier today, right? The Pitt wide receiver rumor is that it's USC for $3 million, right? And I'm trying to think of like where that came from, because I saw Colin Cowherd mention something, and Colin, I'm sorry for listening to this, but like you would have no freaking idea, because he doesn't follow college football and is not so. It's the same thing whenever Dan Patrick show whatever say anything about the Big Ten. Like, this program does not know anything. This is not their world, right? They are trafficking in Twitter. And then you'd see somebody else, like some guy with 1,000 followers, kind of make it 10% more exaggerated, and that would kind of catch on. It was almost like watching a viral Bill Brasky kind of bit for this. And like, I'm sure that there were cash considerations from USC that were involved here, but I think there is a difference between some of the numbers that are commonly thrown out in social media or laundered to like fourth tier blog websites and what's actually in these contracts. Like, I think that there are some really big numbers out there, but whether it was Texas A&M has somehow amassed an NIL the size of Granada, or $2-3 million for some of these things, I don't think they're well sourced enough for me to feel comfortable saying this is definitely happening.
Well, there's a lot. I was talking with somebody about this about an hour ago, just like saying, look, that rumor that used to be confined to a message board is now going on Twitter, and now it's going on a national radio show, and nobody has any idea really, what the thing is. And I think the figures being thrown out for a lot of these deals, unless it's being announced, like in the case of like Miami or some of the actual marketing NIL deals, there's a lot of rumor and innuendo and stuff about the size of these things. And I think honestly, the market itself is a lot smaller. I mean, this is something that you personally have experienced, right? In terms of paying some of the Olympic sport athletes, those deals are not that much. And I think that a lot of colleges understand that. And while, yeah, some 5-star recruit in football might be getting, over that, past that 6-figure mark, for the most part, even the backup offensive linemen and some of those other, they are not getting the kind of numbers that are getting thrown out. Are they getting something? Yeah, I think that they are. But at the end of the day, this is not the SMU type payroll that a lot of these schools are trying to meet in terms of some of the commitments that these collectives and directives have been promising for a lot of these recruits.
If you read that book, A Payroll to Me, by the way, which I did, it's excellent. It's a reminder that even in those teams, not all the good players are getting paid. Craig James was stupid. He played for free. He was just like, I wanted to go play at SMU. That's a thing. And some of the numbers I heard, even from like the bagman world, were not 300,000 for everybody. What is properly sourced and what is a good value for your money, unlike some of these reported deals here for very unproven athletes throughout the system, would be the apparel from our friends at Home Field Apparel, the finest purveyor of officially licensed vintage collegiate apparel. Bryan, is, because he's at a professional function, is dressed like a professional. I am stuck in my basement and daycare is closed again. So I am wearing my smoking Sebastian the Ibis. Or he's not smoking. He would have been smoking, but the license took the pipe out of his mouth. The Ibis, right? Our friends at Home Field are currently refreshing some of their designs before the beginning of Big New Saturday Season 4. You might have seen this already. For my money, the most internet of all of the shirts, all of the designs, is the existentially depressed Yukon Husky. It's the Husky that, like me, hasn't seen the sun in 40 days, and his body is screaming for vitamin D so he doesn't walk out in front of a truck. You've seen the husky. It's in the show notes. There's a big old sticker on the back of my laptop. Well, not only do they have another sticker of a husky that it looks like it's about to pounce on somebody, there's also an anthropomorphic husky which has a gun.
Yep.
And as much as we love mascots doing sports on this podcast and throughout the D1 Ticker Extended Universe, I do want to speak for my boss and speak for my colleagues and say we endorse even further animals with firearms. If you have or maybe a bow and arrow or some other kind of projectile system, if you have something like that from the 30s or 40s, please share it with us because we endorse it, like we do the Revolution Husky. Like we do with some of the other new refreshes here with Maryland and Colorado and Alabama. I don't think I'm supposed to share this with you guys, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. Watch for the Colorado School of Mines. There might be another Colorado School of Mines shirt coming up in the near future. Another school that you and I have thoroughly endorsed. So if you want to make sure that you are cool, like all the other cool people on the internet, you should buy all this stuff, outfit your laptops, your upper body, your lower body, all of your body with home field. When I wear a home field top and a home field bottom, I call that the Indiana tuxedo. Extremely comfortable work from home apparel. You can get that at homefieldapparel.com and use promo code EXTRAPOINTS to save 15% off your first order in the unlikely event that you haven't bought something from them yet. I think most of you have. And then also on the off chance that you are listening to this and thinking, why does the School of Mines have their stuff on here for all these internet nerds and my school doesn't? Fairfield is going to have their stuff on home field very soon. And I know I have a lot of people here who listen to the show that work for schools that are rivals of Fairfield. Why would you let Fairfield have the fun here and you miss out on this? The potential, not just sponsorship revenues, but adoration from the college sports internet at large. If you want to get your stuff on home field, shoot me a note. I'm at matt@extrapointsnb.com. I'll get you an introduction with home field CEO, and we'll see if there's a way to make that happen. I don't really know what to think about a lot of this coverage. I don't know if there's going to be a way to put any of this back in the tube. I don't know if there's a way to meaningfully go after any of these collectives without being sued, especially because so many of them are run by lawyers who I think are specifically trying to get into a lawsuit fight with the NCAA. But I am anxiously awaiting what that new memo and that new guidance is going to be. Lord knows there's a lot of people looking for more structure from Indianapolis on this. Have you heard anything else unrelated to NIL, unrelated to media news, anything else out there in Arizona that you think our listenership should be made aware of right now?
Oh, it's there's a lot of conversations I can't probably relay here on the podcast, but I think the growing anxiety over the future has certainly been palpable, and I think for the most part, everybody's still committed to like doing right by their athletes, and really moving forward in as quickly a manner that helps their schools. Obviously, some are taking advantage of this kind of gray area and this great time, but I think there's some understanding, at least some hope. Really that kind of down the road things will at least slow down, and that to me more than anything has been one of the bigger things coming out of these meetings. Look, there's tons of discussion on NCAA issues, like there's officiating, like I think for the folks that do not understand these type of committee meeting or these spring meetings, is a lot of it's just kind of the nitty-gritty for what's going on in your conference. How's your officiating program? How are you getting better on that? There's a lot of, especially among the coaches, discussions about some of the new rules that are coming into place. You obviously got, have basketball coaches here that are obviously their season just kind of wrapped up. What kind of changes are they looking to make? What kind of changes are on the horizon for things like, there's been talk about reinstituting things like the NCAA Basketball Academy. I know I talked with a few committee members. There's been transformation committee assignments kind of passed out amongst people in terms of portal window opening dates and closing dates and kind of bringing some sense into the chaos that is the transfer portal. So I think everybody is understanding that there's a lot of work left to be done, but I think that hopefully the athletics enterprise itself is going to be in a better place than it started. And I think for athletes, for ADs, for everybody kind of involved.
I will say this. I don't know if this has been your experience in your interactions the past couple of days, but I talked to a couple of commissioners leading up to the two stories that I published this week. And I asked them about their experience with the transformation committee, and their feedback I've got has been uniformly positive. In that, hey, we love what Julie and Greg are doing with keeping us in the loop. We don't feel like any of these things are a surprise. When we saw Ross's story about potentially allowing for unlimited coaches or removing scholarship maximums for other sports, these things were not a surprise. These were things that we had been talking about, and there's a process for us to submit formal feedback, but we're not feeling blindsided, and we feel good about the way this direction everything's going. I'm like, oh, well, that's at least positive. Has that been your experience from talking to people too?
Yeah, I don't think there's any massive surprises. I mean, look, you got to understand, like a lot of these conferences are either have a member on their committees,
Yeah,
and the ADs meet or speak, quite regularly. Obviously, the conference commissioners, just got back from CFP where there are a lot of general discussions. There's kind of the CCA group, which includes even more commissioners not even connected to the college football playoff that met recently, and so the industry discussions are always happening. They're almost on a continuous basis. I ran into an AD this morning that was on one of those committee calls, and so and he ended up obviously kind of relaying a lot of those messages to some of his peers in his conference. So it's unique, certainly in terms of the time and the discussions, but for the most part, there has not been just this massive like, oh, I didn't expect that, because I think there were enough breadcrumbs, or there's at least enough discussions to where you might have had a couple weeks notice at least. And I mean something like full scholarship costs for sports like baseball, and taking those kind of coaching limits off. I mean those things have been discussed for well before the pandemic. I mean that's something that Greg Sankey in particular was pushing for several years prior
yeah.
to this kind of moment. So I don't think anybody's really surprised at that. I think there's maybe some more discussions being had about ultimately how are some of these schools going to pay for that. That is probably the more pressing thing, especially on a local campus level. But I think for the most part the transformation committee has been fairly transparent on a lot of things. And I think more than anything it was probably the lower level schools, those that maybe are one AAA type, probably got a little bit less warning than I think the folks at the Power Five level.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine anybody at Alabama is going to be surprised about anything. But the initial
Yeah.
feedback, and particularly about the scholarship angle that I've heard from talking to some people in the one AAA world, is we're preparing for that. We're obviously not going to be able to offer unlimited scholarships for every single one of our sports. Could we, as a conference, decide to do that for one or two? Yeah, like it's particularly for baseball, right? Where you have some one AAA leagues that can compete for national titles. That's a conversation that they might have. How to align with Title IX and our budgets, and maybe trim back a couple of things in some other places so we can continue to offer a championship experience for this
Yeah, I
market.
mean, look, I think there's some anxiety, at least, especially at that level, about championship access. That's kind of the one thing that really has not been formalized. There's been debate about that. That's the real kind of sticking point, I think, for a lot of folks, out there at beyond the Power Five level, would be championship access and ultimately revenue sharing. And I think we're obviously in the early phases of that, and where that's probably where the most anxiety lasts. Look, things like scholarship things that, yeah, the Alabamas of the world are going to do that. But I had somebody put it to me today. It's like uh, Utah State, has always had a smaller budget than Utah, and Cal State, Fullerton has always had a smaller budget than UC Berkeley. So it's like those things are never going to change. And I think there's some angst about maybe some of the dollar figures being thrown out, but the pecking order in college athletics, there's still a baseline level, and schools that have always been kind of playing on an unfair playing level compared to some of their bigger resource peers, and that probably is not going to change. But what can change is that experience for the athletes themselves, and I think that's what some of these changes are designed to really assist for and ultimately move towards.
Um, a lot of you're absolutely right that like that kind of class stratification is not going to change. But I got a bunch of other things that are going to change. I'll let you get back to it so you can keep poking and bugging people while you're out there to find out what those changes are going to be like. I'm sure I'll be catching up with you more later this week. There's been a couple of stories that I'm pretty proud of already up there on Extra Points. We had some conference realignment updates concerning Chicago State, Incarnate Word potentially going back to the Southland Conference, and what that means for the WAC, and potentially some kind of WAC ASUN, maybe special musical guest Southland FBS experience. You can find all of that on there, along with a deeper analysis of what the NIL market is actually looking like. At the moment, we have a couple other stories and some I think really interesting videos on Collegiate Sports Connect that are coming up soon as well. Bryan, thank you so much for taking some time here. And I'm serious about this. If you find the jacket guy, let's go shake down the jacket guy. So next time we do a Radio Row thing, right? I'm thinking maybe navy, maybe like a navy and white kind of plaid, something really loud, but also maybe like a late 1960s CBS kind of look. If we got to go for a dumber shade of blue, I'm okay with that too. If you make coats, Matt at SB, not SB Nation, Matt at extrapointsmb.com. Let's talk.
Well, I mean, I think we need to aim higher. Look, I've been seeing the bull reps out there. Maybe there might be some sponsorship opportunities. I'm going to have to make a call to the Louisville home office. See what's left in the budget, and maybe we get the extra points or the going for two bowl. Maybe we can go in with some of our good friends at home field, do something like that, and then we can be official in terms of some of those jackets getting made. But I will definitely ask around, my friend.
Yeah, did we talk about this before? That before I was purchased, I actually made calls about that. Do you know how much it would cost to sponsor the New Mexico Bowl?
I'm going to throw out $250K.
It's a little bit more than that, but not that much more. I was told that we could, if we put down $400,000, we could potentially get a bowl, like either New Mexico Bowl or something similar to that. You just have to, I guess now after like the Duck Commander Bowl, whatever, where the ESPN got stiffed, and with the last New Mexico Bowl sponsored by a company that didn't exist, like now I guess you have to submit financials and you can't just crowdsource the whole thing. But if a couple more of you guys subscribe to this newsletter, that's not an impossible thing that we could do a home field / D1 ticker bowl or extra points bowl. If I said that part of the reason I made those phone calls was because of the jackets, I would not be lying to you. That is not the only reason I want to buy a bowl game. That is a reason. But I'll let you go. We can brainstorm our grift here a little bit later. If everyone else is grifting, we should be doing this too. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch up with you later this week.